I supposed to introduce myself or just start talking?
No.
Just start talking?
Yeah, you just, yes.
Okay.
You have an idea of what you want to say.
Yes. So my grandmother would have been 100 years old this year. So we had a sort of unusually wide generation gap in my family. My mom was born when my grandmother was in her 40s, and my mom had me in her 30s, so there's a big generation gap in our family. And there's sort of 4 generations represented because my aunt is 20 years older than my mother, so we sort of had 4 generations worth of ages without having 4 generations. So we have sort of a pretty broad spectrum of ideas about race in my family. But the farthest back I really know about it is my maternal grandmother, the one who would have been 100 this year, who grew up in first St. Louis and then El Paso, and apparently got made fun of as a little girl for having a black girl name, because her name was Pearl and her sister was Opal, and apparently those weren't white girl names where she was as a child. And I don't know if it was that and her contrary nature or what, but she wound up with pretty progressive views for her age, and apparently used to get into fights with people saying, no, someday the blacks are going to vote and they're going to drink from the same drinking fountains as us and everything. And everyone say, oh, Pearl, that's stupid. Why would you even say something like that? Later in life, when after one bad marriage and a divorce, she got married much later in life to a man who had left a reservation, the Chickasaw Reservation down in, I think, Oklahoma or something, who had left the reservation and was very much trying to fit in and be white, because that is a really broke reservation, and he wanted to be able to provide for himself and provide for his family. So he had left. Thankfully, even though in black and white pictures he sort of looks Native American, he had blue eyes, so he was able to sort of pass. And my mom refers to him as white, even though he grew up on the reservation his whole life. I don't think he left until his 20s, when he was the first in his family, I think, to go to college. So she then married interracially, but sort of secretly married interracially. And I think it's funny because now my mom has just remarried a Mexican man who also most people generally think of as just European ancestry and white. So again, we have this sort of marrying interracially, but not in a way that anyone tends to really notice, but that has sort of these cultural impacts, so that sort of being aware of race is just part of my family, because you never know what race you're actually talking to. So I think my concept of race is actually quite similar to my grandmother's, although quite different from my 80-year-old, 75-year-old Aunt Joyce, who grew up in El Paso her whole life, was not the product of the interracial marriage, and is in fact extremely racist against anyone from Mexico, and doesn't know my mom's new husband's nationality of birth. So if you see my Aunt Joyce, don't show her this video, because she doesn't know. I'm done.